Here's our testing apparatus. It's a thick canvas heavy bag on a Pell base, which has been lashed to keep it in some form of alignment with that base, but still allowing for movement. The Maille is held to the bag by large safety pins, also with some degree of flex, trying to replicate at least a little bit like hanging off of someone's body. It is a top-heavy arrangement, like a person in armor, but is a little bit suboptimal. We may revisit this test in the future with a more scientific approach. The Maille we're testing here is 8mm dome riveted mild steel links, and then later on we also tested some 8mm dome riveted mild with solid flat rings interspersed. It's the traditional, I believe it's called 4-in-1 pattern. Here we see Adrian demonstrating posta breve from Fiore. The sword is held down near the right hip with the point pulled in. Breve means short.
Okay, so we've turned the bag a little bit. Here's all the damage from the dagger and spear. We've got fresh linen canvas under here. We've got fresh Maille. We flipped it, so the previously unstruck portion is now up here. We're going to do 2 thrusts, a floating thrust with a passing step, and then we're going to look at a proper couch thrust. I'm kind of betting that the passing step thrust is still going to penetrate, and certainly the couch, just from what we've seen so far, the couch one is going to pass right through. So Adrian here is going to do this. He's wearing gauntlets. It is a sharp, but you know, we're using protective equipment. Oh, you broke this one. Okay, so we have a radically deformed link. It looks like it went from a circle to a nearly flat cross-section, but was unable to penetrate. I think we should actually repeat that one because it looks like it happened to line up where the edge got caught on the flattened and riveted section rather than going across the thinner portions. Regardless, there's about an inch, half inch to an inch of penetration. There's an inch of penetration regardless of the fact that we were unable to actually break the Maille. So that's data. Test 2. Oh, there it goes. So kind of as I was thinking with the deformation, it was just I mean, that's one of those like bullet pings off your helmet and you're like, oh my God, I'm still here. The first thrust landed on the flattened and doubled portion of one of the rings, which caused it to radically deform but not be penetrated. That was just some lucky stuff. This time, we've got about that much penetration. Once it's in, you've got a handle in their meat, and you're going to be able to start working that point around and finding your way into important vitals. So, what is that, 3.5 inches of penetration. Off of that, we have two fully burst links scoring. We're seeing similar damage from that thrust as compared to the spear, just for context. Okay, so the test number 3 failed, but it did provide us with something interesting. I mentioned that the rear post was offset a little bit from the where we set the mail up on the bag. And so what that resulted in was, although it was a couch thrust, it resulted in more rotation because the energy was going straight into the target, and it rotated right off and fell down. So we've re-rigged it so that it's straight on, and I'll include, we had from some bouting last month, we had a really beautiful thrust by Liz Scott. She did the proper thing of planting the point, changing level, cutting the corner, and then driving laterally up through the target's structure. And that's the kind of thing we're trying to simulate, where you're able, through feeling, to adjust your angle and make sure that you're not rotating off.
Get it, and hold! Yes!
Similarly, Adrian, if I can throw you for a second. I'm going to use the other end of the spear to talk about this. You can put the sword down. Imagine this is, go ahead and grab this. Imagine this is a sword in armor. We're going to use the blunt end, obviously. What this tells us is, in our replication of armored combat systems, when I feel the instant of a plant, if I try to resist this, I'm increasing the probability that my armor fails, right? So the moment I feel this this setup, I must yield, turn, and break that point off. And we've seen here in actually testing, a good couch thrust, if it rolls off center, you have a good chance of survival. Your armor's not going to fail as long as you are, in your core, fluid and able to rotate with it. If you resist, it's gonna go through the armor. So what this tells us is armored combat, despite the perception of two, big dudes in, harness just slamming into each other, that's not it. If people thought like that, they would have seen points pass through their armor much more regularly than if they were able to fluidly rotate with the opponent's actions. So, point in mind as we think about training. Having reset up the rig, we're going to replicate the couch thrust. So thumb the guard. His arm is all tucked in. Thumb is on this. The whole structure is locked back here, and then he's using the front hand to just keep that from rising on impact. Effectively like bayonet fighting. Adrian was infantry, done some of that training as well. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can get this second thrust to penetrate. It goes mail, bag, rear post, all in a line now, in order to replicate the ability through feeling to determine where the strike is landing. Okay. We had another failure, even though the testing apparatus was changed so that it went mail, bag, post. So that's data. The lance thrust did a really good job of penetrating the mail, despite arms being detached from body. So what we're going to work on now is I'm going to start with the point planted, and then I'm going to couch and drive from that position. Adrian is going to hold on to the bag from the side, out of the line of fire, to replicate somebody resisting against me like we're wrestling and half sorting. And we'll see if I can get through the mail. I've planted the point, now we're going to couch and drive. Again, we've got ring deformation only about an inch in. Yeah. I'm going to throw a thrust that begins high and ends low from Serpentina Soprana, and we'll see if we can replicate Adrian's success at breaking the Maille with the ballistic strike. Oh, yeah. That's data. That's really interesting data. That's fascinating. Significant penetration again. I've been operating on the concept of couching and driving as an important factor in armored combat. Nope. That's significantly suboptimal compared to ballistic strike from distance. So I'll have to think about that.
Even with wider and thicker flat rings, strikes from distance with momentum were able to punch through. Here's an image of one of those strikes. As you can see in this next image, we even split one of the solid rings. Mike here has, I believe, an Albion ringek, which even without breaking rings was able to stick 3 or 4 inches into the target due to the fineness of its point. Here's Adrian with a late 15th century arming sword that has a raised medial ridge and hollow ground cutting edges. It too passed through the Maille so long as Adrian used good structure and committed body weight behind a ballistic strike from range.